In yesterday's video, we took a look at my first two games in the 59th Annual American Open held in Southern California, in which case, both games I played the Hippopotamus Defense. Today's video, we're going over games 3 and 5, in which case, again, I played the Hippo Defense. Now, we're skipping over game 4 for today because I played the Van Geet Opening in that game as white. Let me know if you want me to make a video on that, if any of you guys are interested in the Van Geet. But yeah, today we're focusing on the Hippo here in round 3. I'm 2 out of 2. My opponent is 2 out of 2, and my opponent's rating is just a touch over 1800. So I see this move d4, and I go with my usual first 3 moves: 1, 2, and 3. e6, tuck the knight. I decided to tuck my knight on d7 here. Didn't want to play b6 with that bishop having eyes on my rook at that point. And e4, b6. Okay, now we're good to go. The bishop doesn't see our rook, obviously. Bishop d2, bishop b7, h4, h6. We got to be ready for h5. The moment we see that, there's not a pawn on f4, so we're good to play g5 there, right? And generally speaking, if I see h4 and there's a pawn on f4, I'll think about this move of h5. But if there's not a pawn on f4, I'll play h6, right? Because sure, if there's a pawn on f4, g5 there, it's just not an option. We're going to lose our pawn, but in this case, we can push that pawn shouldering ahead. And white can sacrifice there, but it's not sound. It might seem scary, but it's not sound. I've seen this. I've played against it. One tournament game comes to mind when I was on my journey of reaching the National Master title by playing nothing but the Hippo as white and black. And my opponent sacked it very early on g5 and was attacking like crazy and pushed that h-pawn like crazy, but I ended up winning the game, and the sacrifice wasn't sound. But yeah, taking a step back to the game, we didn't see the move h5. Instead, I saw this move of rook to c1. And here I played a6. Now, I know I just said h6 doesn't help g5 against f4. Same goes for this position. And honestly, I hardly ever, maybe 5% of the time, I'll play a move like a6 if I see the pawn on c4. I hardly ever do this. The reason I went with it here, which, by the way, it's not even the engine move. The reason I went with it was because I was thinking about playing c5. I thought this bishop on d2 was a little bit oddly placed, and it was making this pawn more vulnerable. Usually in a position like this, there's a bishop on e3. White has 1, 2, 3 defenders on d4. In this case, white only has 1. So I wanted to play c5, right? But let's say, for example, a3 or something. I wanted to play the move of c5, but I didn't want to have to worry about knight b5 stuff, attacking my pawn. Then I got to play knight c8. I just didn't want to worry about it, right? And that is one purpose. That is one reason to play a6, even if you do see the move of c4, is if you want to play c5 and put pressure on that pawn at some point, or at least you want to consider it. But yeah, beyond that, there's really no point, because if you see a4, a5, you can't push the pawn, and you can't push the pawn anyways in most cases, depending on white's setup. Now, in this game, I actually pulled off a b5 idea. That turned out to be pretty interesting, but most of the time you're not going to look at b5 as a major option. But if you do, a6 is obviously the way to prep that. In the game here, we have the move bishop to e3. And here I didn't decide to castle kingside. I mean, going back even to the move rook c1, I can castle. This is a very sound move according to the engine. I'll be honest, I don't really want to fall into this attack right now, but again, it's not sound for white to start sacrificing and going crazy here. I can play king h8, bringing my rook over to g8, really just activating that rook as a defensive presence. And if you want to play h6, okay, let's offer a trade. White's attacking like crazy, but this pawn on h6 is oddly kind of giving us support. This is a white pawn, but it's doing our job for us. It's actually helping the king on h8 be protected. And that's just an idea in general. Sometimes you'll see it in games where like white will push a pawn and they'll take on h7, and then black will just, okay, I'm just going to move to the side. Thanks for the protection, right? That's the idea there. So we are better here. But in the game, I'm like, you know what? My king's safe. Practically speaking, my king's safe. I don't need to castle into g8 right now. My king's safe. It's not like the rook's barreling down all this activity or anything. So I waited on that. I played a6, bishop e3. Now my opponent has fixed this kind of issue, so c5 now is not something that I would think about. And I want to mention too, this game is game 30 minutes, delay 5, right? So I probably would have played this differently if I had more time, or at least I hope so. But yeah, I mean, I think with this time on the clock, you can't calculate too much. You really got to play with your intuition. I played the move knight f6. Now this is a solid idea. f5 is f5 is really something that we can consider here as well, but I played the move knight f6, and just keep in mind, okay, it's not always good for white to push. It really isn't. If we see a move like d5, we'll lock it up. right? And that's just a general saying you can memorize in the Hippo. If you see D5, lock it up. If you see E5, think about it. In this case, the move of E5, we can capture. You can't take with your knight unless you want to lose your bishop. If you take with the D pawn, all right, let's snatch off the queen, play knight D7. We got 2 attackers on that pawn, and white has 1. Let's say they castle. We don't even have to take right away. We can castle queenside. Even if you do get 2 defenders on, okay, we get rid of one of them. We win the pawn. We're up a pawn. So in the game there, my opponent wisely did not play the move E5, and we instead see this idea of knight to H2. Okay. Now, I played the move of rook to B8. This is okay. This is a solid move. I'm not going to say it's a blunder, but I would call it a mistake. I would, because I missed this idea of knight to F5. Not a common idea in the Hippo. This game here breaks a lot of rules when it comes to the Hippo defense. Just white's setup is very irregular. A 3-pawn center, but then a fianchettoed bishop, a pawn on H4, a knight on H2, and a couple of tempi used with that bishop. So just an odd position that I haven't reached very much. I've reached similar positions, but this kind of setup from white, this is my first time seeing it in its full totality. So, knight F5 there. It's an idea that you can hold in mind, because we know that in the Hippo, if we see E5, D5, and F5 become weak, but in this case, with the knight moving, this bishop is hanging. We can play that move. We can play it. We're looking to capture off that bishop on E3, which is great for us. D4 would become more weak. We'd have the bishop pair, all that kind of good stuff. If bishop F4 trying to save it, knight H5, let's keep going after that minor piece. If white decides to take the knight, well, we take on G2. Take the piece, get the heck out of there. No shame in that. Get your piece, get the heck out of there. Get the pawn, get the heck out of there. Run back home. And if a move like F takes E6, this is really where, I look at a line and I'm like, I don't feel bad about missing this, because even if I calculated it up to this point, I probably would have been worried about, just the fact that my king does not support these pawns on E6 and G6 very well at all. Now, if white takes on D6, the queen does a great job on D6 and B6, but E6 and G6 are very weak. Queen D3, we can play a move like King F7 to protect the pawn, but I don't know. I don't like my king being the glue for my pawns personally in this kind of position. So I probably would have stopped it there. But apparently, the young just says Queen E7. Go down a pawn. It's fine. Take with the queen. You're good. Right, and when I look at this position, it actually looks like a lot of fun. Castling kingside or queenside, you got F and E 8 squares that you can barrel your rooks on. Both of your bishops are actually pretty active. Your bishop on G7 is great. Your bishop on B7 is also very active. And guys, when we're talking about bishop activity or just piece activity in general, I don't look at what they see right now. Like, for example, this bishop right now can hardly see anything. It can only see the square of F8. That's all it can see. But that doesn't mean this bishop is bad at all. Now, this bishop would be a lot worse if this was a pawn, but it's not. It's a knight. This is a very easy piece to move. It has plenty of options. It's not a little pawn that only has one move available. This is a knight. And this knight can move at any point, and boom, the bishop's more active, right? So when you're talking about active pieces, don't be worried so much about, oh, gosh, my queen's just not active now. Whoa, it's not a pawn. If it's a pawn, be worried about it. If it's not a pawn, I still count this as great activity for the queen. Let me know down in the comment section below if that makes sense. But I think players sometimes get really worried about activity, which is great. Right, I prioritize that. I talk about it a ton on this channel. I talk about it a ton with my private students. By the way, if you're interested in private lessons, I'll leave a link below. But when we're talking about activity, be more worried about pawns prohibiting activity than your pieces, because pawns can get locked up. They're weak. They don't have a lot of choices, but your minor and major pieces do. Taking a step back to knight H2, I missed that crazy knight F5 line, and I played this move rook to B8, just defending this bishop. Sometimes when there's bishop tension, I'll just play a move like rook B8 and just defend that minor piece. I thought about queen B8, queen A7, and then getting that queen to the corner. That's another idea that you can play in the Hippo. But in this case, I did not go for that, because my general rule of thumb is that if there's a bishop staring at A7, I don't touch it. I don't touch it with a rook. I don't touch it with a queen in most cases, depending on the setup. But yeah, it's just hard if you bring your queen to A7. Well, not B7, obviously. Learn how to click square Solomon. A7, and then white just launches a pawn. And if you take or push, then white has discovery stuff. It's just not fun, right? So in this case, I play rook B8. Now this is defended. So if white ever wants to push, my bishop's defended at the very least. Queen d2 is played, and here I could have went with knight f5 again, but I missed it. And even if I didn't, even if I saw it, I don't know if I would have went for that. Here I play the move b5. Very rare idea in the Hippo to play b5 against a pawn on c4, but here I am trying to break things open. Of course, right when I played it, I went, oh my gosh, horrible mistake. It actually wasn't according to the engine. It's kind of interesting. When the game ended, I thought I just played terrible. I thought I played terrible. I thought white was nearly winning this entire game. Turns out white's best advantage was a little bit over +1, and I had over 90% accuracy. Not saying that to brag, just saying there's some games where I think I played really horrible, and I'm like, wow, okay, apparently not. And there's some games I think I played brilliantly, and yeah, the game review on chess.com told me to stop thinking like that. So played b5 here. White ended up capturing, which is the best move. Now, white can capture on b5. In this case, which, by the way, when I was calculating this, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm losing. What am I thinking here? I somehow totally missed that this pawn on c7 is attacked by a knight and a rook. Again, we don't have a lot of time in this game compared to usual. And I also haven't played in a tournament in a while, so I have that fog. If you guys are playing over-the-board tournaments, you probably know what I'm talking about. You're not in the rhythm. You're not in the flow. You're just not calculating everything super precisely. And literally in this kind of moment, I'm like, gosh, I just have fog right now. I feel like I'm not quite processing everything correctly. Turns out, though, we're actually okay. I mean, there's multiple things that we can do here. Castling kingside is one of them, just giving up that pawn. We can also take on e4, and then if a move like knight takes c7, play king f8. Right, that's totally fine. Castling kingside, we can take on g2, rook b7. We're attacking that knight. Queen c2 here is the only move that gives white, some kind of substantial edge. And even then, it's pretty small. Knight d5, we capture back. We're down a pawn. It kind of reminds me of a Benko gambit a little bit. The b file and the a file are open. We're looking at, maybe queen a8, eyeing up that pawn, eyeing up the king. Again, that queen on a8 is still active on that diagonal because these are not pawns. That is not a pawn. That is not a pawn. They can move very quickly at a moment's notice. This knight is untouchable right now. Untouchable. This knight is so far away from ever, touching it. And this bishop on e3 is horrendous compared to ours, putting pressure on d4. So that's apparently a good position for black. But my opponent plays d5. Here in this case, I play b4, trying to distract that knight from the defense of d5 and e4. We see this move of knight b5. And I ended up taking on d5. Was a mistake. The engine move, castling kingside. I didn't even consider this. Again, I hope you guys, those of you that watch the Hippo Defense videos don't look at this game and go, oh my gosh, I should be castling with a pawn on h6. I should be playing b5 against a pawn on c4. Guys, this game, I'm telling you, this game is like unlike any other game I've played with the Hippo. It really just breaks the rules. It does. And of course, there's always exceptions to the rules in chess and stuff in any opening, but this is a big one. Usually castling kingside in this case is horrible, right? Because white can just take the pawn. The rook no longer defends it, but in this case, we take the pawn on d5. If you take on fine, we'll take back. If you want to take on d5, the bishop takes. Your bishop's hanging. If you capture, our knight can capture back, and guess what? c7 is defended going back. If you take c7 right away, all right, we take the pawn on e4. We're in business. If you take on e6, knight takes e4, attacking the queen. You want to capture back? All right, cool. Your rook's hanging. Your pawn's attacked. Right? I mean, and really your knight's attacked. I mean, you got 3 hanging pawn/pieces here. You can save the rook or the knight, but you're going to lose something here. You're going to lose something. If knight takes c7, we can take on d5. The best thing, according to the engine here, is for white to take with the pawn and leave this knight on c7, but we're still better after bishop c8. Still better here. This is one of those kind of dynamic, dense positions. We have great bishops with great potential. Our knights are hopping all over the place. White has a pawn on d5 that, has some defense right now, but we're also very easily attacking it. And, just a lot of counterattacking chances here. Tactical play. Castling kingside. What if the rook takes? Well, bishop a6, and your knight's attacked twice. And if you save your knight, well, we take the rook. So, very dynamic position there. I missed that. I played e takes d5. My opponent takes, king f8. I was hoping my opponent wouldn't find e takes d5, and thankfully for me, white didn't. In this case, it's just hard to play. It's just hard to play. You can play knight f5, you can take a bishop or whatever, king g8, try to tuck that king, but we're down a pawn, and this knight on c7 is very annoying. This pawn on b4 is loose. It's just not a pleasant position for the black side. So the move of knight takes d5 is played. In this case, I'm able to capture, and now I feel like I have a little bit more space, a little bit more comfortability. Bishop a6 here is a move that I should have thought more about. Preventing that king from castling kingside. If white wants to trade, okay, bishop, the bishop will be defended after queen a5. If you take, we capture back, and this is another one of those cases. White's up a pawn, but we have sufficient compensation. This pawn on a2 attacked, the pawn on d5 attacked, the pawn on b2 attacked. White's under pressure. They're up a pawn, but they feel the heat, and this king still cannot castle because of our queen on a6. I instead play queen a5, and I still like the move, at least visually. The engine doesn't love it as much, but the queen, knight, bishop all putting pressure on that pawn, putting pressure on a2. We now see this move castling kingside. I capture on d5. We now have trading off, and this move rook fd1. I end up taking on d2 and playing knight f5, attacking the bishop and defending this pawn. Bishop f4. I decided to trade down. Right, attack the bishop, and once you take, all right, my isolated pawn is no longer isolated. It is connected to the rest of this pawn chain. Rook d7, king g7. Whole idea being I got to get my rook over to f8 fast. Knight f3. I ended up playing rook b e8, and here I'm trying to play aggressively. I'm trying to find counterplay. That is huge in the end game. Sometimes in the opening and the middle game, you just got to defend. And sometimes in the end game too, but oftentimes when it comes to the end game, if I have a choice between defending a pawn all day or going, you know what, take it, I'm going to get activity, I'm going to win one of your pawns too, I'll take the second option any day of the week. And that includes this game. I play e4, knight c2. Guys, this is one of those examples. I can play rook b8. I can hang on to my pawn for dear life. But in my experience, when you are just trying to hang on to pawns and hang on to pawns and hang on to pawns, it's hard to hang on to them forever. It's just hard. So instead of that, what I do here is I go, you know what? Have the pawn. Have it. I'm going to play e3. I'm going to try to win one of yours. If you take the pawn here, e2, not good for white. White ends up playing the move of f takes e3. I was expecting knight takes e3, and in that case, we can take on e3, capture back with the rook, king f2. This is what I was expecting because my rook cannot go up, and it cannot go anywhere to the side, only backwards. e4, e5, e6, or e8. Turns out we're okay, though, right? And again, in this kind of position, guys, don't just hang on to the pawn for dear life. Go, you know what? Take it. I'll take one of yours. I'll take one of yours. And if they play rook a7, you can take, right? That's fine. Now play b3. That's one option. You could also play rook b8. And there's going to be times, guys, where you have to play aggressively. You have to find some kind of way. In this case, rook c8 is also a good option, threatening to win that pawn. Very tricky move, right? I mean, white's going, oh, okay. They'll win my pawn. I won there. Nope. Check. We win the pawn on b2. Another option, b3. The engine likes this, right? That's a pretty high-level idea, but whole idea being if a3, b2 is very weak to and prone to attack. And if you take, we play rook b8. You can defend your pawn. White's up a pawn. They're defending. Good job, white. You're defending your pawn. But then rook b4. If your rook ever moves, we take the pawn that you're trying to hold on to. If your king runs over, well, then we just win your pawn on g3. So this is a dead draw. No way for white to win this. No way. No way to do it, right? So again, knight c2. I could defend this pawn for dear life, but I play e3. F takes e3 is played. I ended up taking on g3 here. I'm trying to play actively. Knight f5, attacking both of these isolated pawns in this kind of position. And, knight d5 is played. I now take on h4, and we have a race. b4, I throw in a check. Knight e5 attacking a rook. White offers a trade. I take it, and I throw in a check. Now here I'm trying to play actively. And at the start, I was thinking, gosh, if I do throw in this check, I can throw in another one, win this pawn. But then my knight's trapped. But then I realized when calculating, oh, wait, I can play rook d8. And no matter how you defend this knight, right, it might seem like our knight's trapped, but it's not because this knight is pinned. And that's what happens in this game. Knight takes b4. I capture off on d5, and at this point, my opponent resigns. This is completely winning for black. This pawn is not going to make it. And we got 3 passed pawns rolling down the board. So my opponent resigns here. All that's to say, this game here is an exception to many Hippo rules. Let me know down below what you think of it. Again, these things that happen, castling kingside with the pawn on h6, playing b5 against the pawn on c4, these are usually ideas in the Hippo that you shouldn't even consider. But somehow in this game, with white's weird setup, it became a thing. Guys, over the last couple of years, I have made 4 online chess courses on the Hippopotamus Defense, Ponziani Opening, Check Pierce Defense, and How to Crush the Scandinavian Defense. If you're interested in one of these or all 4 of them, all you got to do, go down in the description below, plug in the discount code 2024, and you will receive 30% off on any of the courses you decide to get. Only good until the end of this year. The Hippopotamus Defense in particular is what I played as both white and black to reach the National Master title, and yeah, I mean, I got way too much content on it here on YouTube, but I also got an over 6-hour course, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's now shift our focus to our final game, to my final game, game 5, in which case I'm going up against my guy Leo. So again, round 4, I played a Van Geet. I drew a fellow NM who was rated 2270. Pretty dead even game the whole way through. I did have one opportunity that was pretty interesting that I missed, but yeah, overall pretty dead even game, and we just fizzled out into a draw. So that was round 4. Now round 5, I'm going up against my guy Leo, and yeah, Leo is a guy that I grew up playing with, playing in the same kind of tournaments and stuff. And most of the people I grew up with playing don't play anymore, so it's cool to see someone from my age group, still going to tournaments, still enjoying the game and all that kind of stuff. But he starts this thing off with the move of pawn to c4, and Leo's a very strong player. I knew that this is going to be a tough one, win or loss. c4 is played, English opening. I end up going with my usual 1, 2, and 3. And, he goes with a very strong setup. I mean, this is a very powerful setup against so many black options. Does a great job of kind of combining dark squares, light squares, all that kind of presence. And we now have the move d3. Now, I could have played b6. I'll be dead honest. I was worried about e5, right? e5. And my rook's under attack. Usually, when white has a fee-encoded bishop, they usually have a knight on f3 and a pawn on e4. In this case, the knight's on e2. So this bishop does have pretty direct access to the rook the moment the pawn pushes. I didn't want to play b6 because of that e5 move, as mentioned. And for rook b8, white can take, knight b5. This is what I was worried about. I got 2 pawns hanging right now. One of them results in a check. The other one, I just lose a pawn. Apparently, according to the engine, kind of similar to, I guess that's the theme of this video. I guess the theme here is that rules are broken in this video. Hippo rules go out the window, I guess. But apparently we're okay. Although I will say I don't feel okay. Now, first off, we're supposed to castle so that we don't get checked, right? And just, get our king to safety. Now, if the move of knight takes d6, knight c5. I missed this idea. This is very interesting. The knight's attacked. If you move the knight, d3 will be attacked by our knight and our queen. If you defend the knight, e5, your bishop's attacked. You can trade down, fine. We'll take back with the rook. But again, your bishop's under attack, d3, backwards pawn. We're going to win it. We have a good game here. All let's say, though, even after castling knight takes a7, bishop b7, apparently, we're just about dead even. I'll be honest, I don't feel dead even here. I feel like I'm just down a pawn, and I don't know what we got out of it. I mean, I could start saying stuff, but I don't like the position. So all let's say, be careful with another fee-encoded bishop. You don't want that bishop unleashing on your rook. I play the move h6 here. And now play f5. Just trying to, break this game open, make an impact here. I know that my opponent's setup here is very strong, so I just want to, make a little bit of a presence there. I can't play b6, queen d2, knight f6. Just adding more pressure, looking towards potentially knight g4. I'd love to capture off that bishop, but of course Leo's not going to let me do that. h3. And now I play a6. Now, the reason I did this, again, I usually don't do this in the Hippo against c4, but we've kind of went away from our traditional Hippo first off because I don't have a fee-encoded bishop on b7. So this is kind of a semi-Hippo, however you say semi or semi. I feel like I go back and forth for some reason. But yeah, we're out of our usual setup a little bit. We don't usually play f5 right away. We usually get our full thick-skinned Hippo, and then we think about, our breather moment. But in this case, I play a6. First off, to potentially prep b5. I might have a bishop on d7. I might put this rook on b8, and I want this rook to be able to move without having to worry about this pawn on a7. Of course, in a lot of cases, you can trap the bishop, but white has a fee-encoded bishop as well. I just wanted to, play that move a6, and it's also just a waiting move. Practically, this is a fast time control in the tournament. I'm just trying to make waiting moves, read out my opponent, slightly improve, all that kind of good stuff. Castling kingside, I play g5. Right. And I knew that this probably, like pushing like crazy here, it's not going to checkmate my king or anything like that. But I'm just trying to take space. Leo here plays a move f4. Very, very good move. I play g4. Right. I don't want to take that. And white starts unleashing all this activity on me. I'm able to play g4. White has a battery ram here, but that pawn's stuck. And this is what I'm talking about, right? If this was a knight, this bishop and this queen are very active. They're great. But that's not a knight. That's a pawn. So this knight is stuck. Because of that, not active, not active, not active. Right? Makes sense. All it really comes down to is a pawn or a piece. All right. If you're talking about, oh, my piece can't see far right now. Is it because of a pawn or a piece? If it's because of a piece, and by the way, when I say piece, I'm meaning minor or major. Minor pieces being knight or bishop, major being rook and queen. If we're talking about just a pawn, then yeah, you're stuck. It's probably not good. If you're talking about another minor or major piece that's blocking your activity, well, you're good to go. Right? All you got to do is move the piece at some point. H4 is played here. White here locking things up. I castle kingside, e5, knight d7. White advances to d4. I play knight b6. Kind of remind me of Alekhine defense a little bit, getting that knight over, attacking c4. b3 is played holding things together. And, white here has great space, a better position. I'm not going to sit here and say we have a good position here. White has a better position. I play d5, and I was expecting c5. And this is what white should have played. Guys, in this kind of scenario, don't just assume that because 6 out of the 8 files on the board are pretty locked up with pawns means that it's just a draw. No, in this case, black, what does black have here? Nothing. Black has nothing. Everything is locked up. And in a lot of ways, white has nothing too. But what I will say is that white is a lot better prepped to start pushing pawns. b4. If we play c6, a4, it doesn't stop anything. b5 is on the way. White can get great activity here, and they have more space on their side of the board. If you look at black's setup, we're more cramped, we're more set back. White has pushed a ton with their pawns, and that just gives their pieces more room to operate, which is good for their side. But instead, we have the move c takes d5. I was happy to see this. It gave me a little bit of life, a little bit of breathing room, a little bit of the ability to maneuver and not just hang on. Because my goal there was to just play for a draw, honestly. Hang on the king side, protect my king, build a fortress, play solid, hold on to a draw. That's really all I could do there. But in this case, there are chances to win. Okay, c1, c6, let's solidify that knight. Right, knight takes d5. I could have captured back with a knight, but I decided to take back with the c-pawn. I really wanted to, activate this bishop. And in my head, right, what I'm thinking is, and of course, Stockfish will always come in and, say what it thinks. But in my head, I'm thinking, you know what? If I take with the c-pawn, this bishop is not that great. You are eyeing my pawn, but my pawn's defended by a pawn, and you cannot touch this pawn because everything is so freaking locked up right now. So this bishop's kind of just staring at asphalt. It is staring at our pawn, but it ain't going anywhere. So I thought, you know what? I kind of like my knight more than that bishop. I kind of like it. Now, of course, this knight is neutralized right now, but I felt like it had more potential. So I decided to take with the pawn and not my knight, right? But okay, we have the move a4, bishop d7, just eyeing some light squares there. Queen a5. That move scared me a little bit when I first saw it, but, just make a calm move here. Bishop c6, right? Rook f7. Keep in mind your rooks. Don't just go side to side on the last rank. They can go up, and now they have a lot more portability, a lot more flexibility. Bishop b4, bishop f8, right? If we're asking ourselves, which bishop's better, this one or this one? The white's is better. Let's trade. White's is better. Bishop c5. I ended up playing knight d7. Knight d7 there, okay? Yeah, I could take on c5, but then c takes d5 is played, right? My knight has to run. The d4 square opens up for that knight, which is not great. I really don't want a knight there at some point to fall into that spot and start attacking e6. That's not good for me. So I play knight d7 here, just keeping things calm, attacking the queen. Leo goes, you know what? I don't want to take. I'm going to play queen b4. Here I could have played knight takes c5 and rook to c7. Now, I just didn't even think about this because I was thinking, oh, knight d4, and this isn't good. But apparently bishop d7, we hang onto the pawn, and we have attackers on c5, and we have more on the way. White is in trouble. White's in trouble. But I missed that. I play the move of, rook to c8. a5 there is also a good move to throw in there before taking on c5. But I played rook c8. And yeah, rook c3. In this case, I found the move of a5. Okay, I took some time here. Took a few minutes on the clock. I don't know how many, maybe 4 or 5. I don't know. But I really just thought through, okay, this is a moment that I really got to think through things. I got to figure out what I'm doing here. I'm on the brink of losing this if I mess things up. White has a lot of activity coming down, but it just felt like White's setup was a little bit awkward. Like White was pushing a little bit too hard. So I just thought, you know what? There's got to be something here. There's got to be something here. And I found the move of a5, kicking that queen back, capture with the knight. And in this position, guys, I pushed my pawn up to d4. Now, apparently there's other options there besides d4. D4 is the engine move, but I thought it was make or break for d4, low key. And sure, if I had to think about it, b6, for example, great move. c5 there. We're pinning that pawn to the queen. But d4 here. My idea is, look, I don't want to let that knight on d4. That knight on d4 will be a monster, attacking my pawn on e6. Just getting activity. Maybe b5, d6, all this stuff. No. We got to play d4. We got to break this game open. We got to attack the rook. We got to put pressure on g2, all that kind of good stuff. Rook d3, we take. I now play queen d5 check, queen e4. Both of these pieces are hanging. There's only two ways to hang on to both. Knight c1, you defend the rook, but now rook takes c5, and we are threatening rook c2 a check because we want to win your queen. If you move your queen, all right, we take off the defender. We take the rook, right? That's how I would play it, at least. I mean, the engine wants you to bring this rook over, but I would just probably remove the defender. Simple chess, simple win, good win. That's my motto. But queen e4, instead we have the move rook d2. This is the other way white can do it. I now ended up playing pawn to d3, just continuing to advance. And at this point in the game, we're both sitting in time trouble, under 5 minutes each, right around here. And at the end of it, we both had about 1 minute on the clock. Again, this is delay 5, so it's not like, you have to move fast, but you got to move within 5 seconds or else your clock is going to start going down. I play d3, knight c3, queen e3, attacking the rook, putting pressure on that guy, right? Putting pressure. You can bring your rook over to d1, but white's still in trouble there. c5 is going to fall. And if you ever do take on d3, then f2 happens. Your king's in danger. All that kind of stuff is something you really got to be concerned about. So queen b2 is played. I now capture with my bishop. Knight b5, bishop b4. Hey, let's attack the rook. Let's ask that rook what the heck it's doing. If white brings this rook back, we can throw in a check. That wins. This is winning. Whole idea being, if the queen takes, we have a fork with the pawn against the rooks. So instead we see this move rook to g2. I play pawn to d2, just continuing to advance. My idea here is to play rook c1. But here Leo goes with the move knight d6. And, I capture off. And here I kind of had a panic moment because I only have a couple minutes on the clock, not much time left. And I'm thinking, I just don't see a clear win here, right? An easy win. Originally, I was just going to play rook c1, and I'm thinking, well, I'm attacking the rook. This is going to promote. Sure, you can take on d2, but then I capture back and I take your rook. But then I went, oh my gosh, wait, d7, and I can't freaking stop the pawn from promoting. Did I just lose this? Turns out we're still good here, right? I mean, we're so good. We can take on d7, throw in a check, play rook f3, play actively here. Play actively. If rook takes b7, let's take a pawn. Play rook f3, going after this guy. If a move like rook b5, we could take. We could also just kind of keep improving our king. This king is absolutely stuck. Our king has room to improve in a lot of different ways. And if you take on a5, we take on b3. We're good there, right? But I instead played this move of queen e1, right? And it took me a little bit of time to find this, but I had to take a breath. I had to sit there and go, you know what? I know there's something here. There has to be. There has to be a win here. Take a breath, recenter. I'm in time trouble. That's what it comes down to. And I'm not saying anytime I do that, I find the right move, trust me. But I would say that, when you're playing tournament chess, you got to learn how to just take a breath. You only got 2 minutes. Don't panic. Just take a moment and try to find the win. And queen e1 is by far the best engine move there. This rook is attacked. Yeah, I mean, sure, there's different things white can do there. White could take with the queen, for example, but then we take the rook. If you push, guess what? Rook d8, and you got 2 attackers on d7, right? Rook g to g1 is played. I ended up throwing in a check. If you block with the rook, thanks for the rook. If you block with the rook, thanks for the rook. And after king h1, I throw in a check. Now, in the game, and again, we only have about 1 minute each on the clock here. I was concerned about rook g2. I barely even looked at this. Turns out there's so many ways to win, right? But I was concerned about that because I saw a clear win against king h2. But here I can just play rook c2, right? Rook c2, kick the queen, and then you promote to a queen. You got 2 queens, and if they take one of them, you get mate. Game over. Here Leo goes with king h2. I play rook c2, and here he resigns. I mean, you're going to lose your queen, or if you move it, I promote with check against the king on h2. So that was a game there where, it kind of went from just fighting for a draw to kind of unleashing, unraveling, kind of going into white's setup and really playing actively. But in the game of chess, guys, you got to be on your feet. You got to stay ready. You got to stay locked in. And, when you're low on the clock, just try your best to just take a second, take a breath, and realize, okay, I haven't made a mistake here. And you know, at that point in the game, I'm thinking, gosh, the last 4, 5, 6 moves I've made, I don't think I messed up anywhere. They all seemed like solid moves. There has to be something here. There has to be. And there was, right? And thankfully I found it. Again, I ain't sitting here saying I always do, but yeah, just remember that in your games. Take a breath, take a second. You got to be mindful of the clock, but just take a second. You don't got to freak out. Guys, I hope y'all enjoyed today's video. And just a quick reminder that in addition to the 30% off all online courses sale this month, we wanted to also give a 20% off sale on our physical merch all December. We got shirts, hoodies, mugs, and more on the merch shelf below, and we got a lot more on the website. So check them out and use the code WINTER20 for 20% off. On top of that, I wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of December in 2024. I appreciate you guys a ton. It's been great getting to know you. And yeah, I'm just humbled by your support. And if you guys haven't thought about joining the Patreon community before, there's some exclusive benefits that you gain by becoming a member. And I look forward to seeing you over there on the platform. Peace.